Hey guys, today we'll be taking a look at the latest polls that have been released in the competitive races that we have this November for the 2022 Senate elections. And because most of these races, the incumbent parties are going to just win them anyways, there's really no point in talking about all of the 35 races I believe that we have this fall. So I'm really only going to focus on the races that will actually matter. These are the races that will actually decide the makeup of the US Senate after this November. I have 46 solid for the Republicans, 46 solid for the Democrats, solid and likely. Essentially, these races are going to go to their respective parties. There's really no way that Democrats are going to get a win in Florida, and there's really no way that Republicans are going to get a win in a state like Colorado. Although these two races may be a little bit closer, it's really very unlikely for the opposite party to win. And so now we have these 8 toss-up races. These are the ones that are going to decide the makeup of the U.S. Senate after the 2022 midterms and decide whether or not Joe Biden will be able to get his legislation through after the first half of his presidential term. So starting off with the state of Nevada, looking at the latest polls that have been released in this state, I would say that the polling numbers here are not good for the Democrats. I think that Adam Laxalt, the Republican frontrunner, does have a slight advantage in this state. So looking at the 2022 election here in the state of Nevada, if you look at the polling for the Republican primary, Adam Laxalt is dominating the primary currently, and he is expected to win and challenge Catherine Cortez Masto, the incumbent Democrat, in November. And so we will have a primary in this state on June 14th, so that's a little bit over a month away. Adam Laxalt will very likely win the Republican nomination, while of course Democrats will renominate Catherine Cortez Masto, the incumbent Democratic senator. So Catherine Cortez Masto is probably one of the most vulnerable Democrats in the Senate. In 2016, she defeated Joe Heck with 47% of the vote, and she, of course, replaced the retiring majority leader, Harry Reid. So Catherine Cortez Masto, I think, is going to face a very tough re-election bid this November against Adam Laxalt, and if you were to look at the head-to-head polling between the two individuals, you will see that Catherine Cortez Masto has been behind in most of the polls that have been released. Adam Laxalt has led in the most recent polls, and the last time that Cortez Masto was ahead was all the way back in early April. Before that, it was January of this year. So Adam Laxalt, I think that his polling numbers are strong enough that in a Republican-dominated environment that we will have this November, Adam Laxalt has a very good chance at flipping the state of Nevada for the Republican Party. And if you were to look at the polls that we've seen so far, as you can see, there was one that showed Cortez Masto up 8. There was also one from earlier this year showing Laxalt up 3. So really the polling has been very back and forth. I think that it's clear that this is going to be a very close race, but with the fact that Cortez Masto is not especially a very strong candidate, she is not particularly strong. She is still a relatively good candidate for the Democratic Party, but she is not uniquely a strong candidate in any way, like, you know, we saw with Rob Portman in 2016 in Ohio, winning by 20 points, or Joe Manchin in West Virginia. Catherine Cortez Masto does not really have any of that. She won in 2016 because Democrats did relatively well there. She got the same margin as Hillary Clinton. So she is going to face a very tough re-election bid this November, and so right now I do think that the polls do indicate that this race currently does tilt just a little bit in favor of the Republicans. I do think that Adam Laxalt right now does have a very slight edge, but really it will come down to the campaign that both candidates will hold in the coming months. And so the next state I want to look at is the state of Arizona, where Mark Kelly will be running for his re-election. He won the 2020 special election in Arizona, defeating Martha McSally with 51.2% of the vote, winning the state by 2.4%, and he of course outperformed Joe Biden's 0.3% margin here over Donald Trump. So in 2022, the Republicans they have a pretty contested primary currently, with Jim Lamont, who is currently the frontrunner in this race. Blake Masters actually has a higher chance of winning, and Mark Brnovich, the Attorney General of the state of Arizona, his numbers have fallen off quite a bit over the last couple of weeks, and the primary in Arizona will occur on the 2nd of August. So we still have over 2 months to go, and a lot will probably change in those 2 months. So really, who the candidate is in Arizona is still very much in question, and so right now I think that all 3 of these candidates would be okay challenging challengers against Mark Kelly. I think that Mark Kelly, no matter what, will go into this race with a slight advantage. He is relatively popular, a lot more popular than Kyrsten Sinema, and I think that a more divided Republican primary will lead to the Republicans being weaker overall on the ballot in November. So looking at the polls between Mark Kelly and all of his possible opponents this November, Mark Kelly is led in every single poll that has been released. If you look at the 538 numbers here, Mark Kelly has not been behind in any poll that has been released between him or and any potential Republican candidate, even against Doug Ducey, the incumbent Republican governor. Mark Kelly has led in every single poll, and I think that really does say a lot. I think that he is one of the strongest candidates Democrats have, especially in a state like Arizona, because Arizona will be one of the most contested races. Even in 2024, where Kyrsten Sinema will have to run for her re-election, the state of Arizona is not a lock for the Democratic Party at all. This is the first time that Democrats have held both Senate seats in Arizona since the election of 1952. So it has been 60 years since Democrats have held both seats in Arizona. So Mark Kelly, no matter what, is going to have a very tough re-election this year, even if he does end up winning. But I think that as of right now, just looking at all the numbers, he has not been behind in a single poll, and none of these polls have been funded by the Democratic Party or by the Mark Kelly campaign itself. So right now, I think that Mark Kelly is in a very positive position going into this race this November. And so before I go any further, make sure to join the Discord server if you have not, the link to which is at the very top of the description below, where you will stay updated on the 2022 races. We're covering every single primary over there, so make sure to join my Discord server, link at the very top of the description below. So now we have one for each party, and the next state I want to look at is the state of Wisconsin, where Ron Johnson will be running for re-election. Ron Johnson, of course, was re-elected in 2016 and will be running for a third term in 2022. Now, looking at his potential Democratic opponents, currently Mandela Barnes is the clear frontrunner. He is the incumbent lieutenant governor of the state. So Tony Evers is going to have to find a new lieutenant governor, but right now Mandela Barnes is the clear favorite to win the Democratic primary. And looking at the only poll that we've seen between Ron Johnson and Mandela Barnes, you will see that the poll did show that the two are even. So here it is on 538. I do like looking at it better here because you can see whether or not these polls are funded by the Democratic Party or a campaign itself. And if you look at this poll between Barnes and Johnson, you will see that this poll was one funded by Mandela Barnes, and this is a little bit of a big deal because polls funded by your campaign typically do show you doing a lot better than you typically would. Of course, they would just poll voters that they think would give them more positive results. So Mandela Barnes is even with Ron Johnson in this poll, but really the fact that it is a poll sponsored by his campaign does show that, the numbers really aren't probably that good for Mandela Barnes, and that Ron Johnson is probably doing a little bit better than what the poll suggests. So I do think that right now Ron Johnson, as an incumbent Republican in the state of Wisconsin that will most likely tilt to the left or to the right this November, I do think that Ron Johnson does have an advantage in his state of Wisconsin. And so now moving down south a little bit to the state of Ohio. Ohio, I think, is going to have a pretty interesting race. We actually already saw a primary for the state of Ohio. The primary has already occurred. And for the Republicans, J.D. Vance was nominated with the very late endorsement of Donald Trump. And Tim Ryan, of course, easily won the Democratic primary. So J.D. Vance winning 32% of the vote. Josh Mandel, 23.9%. Mandel was the favorite for a very long time in this race. And Matt Dolan, of course, came in third place with 23%. So J.D. Vance is not really that much to the right compared to many of the other nominees that we've seen, especially in Pennsylvania with Mastriano as the governor nominee. But J.D. Vance did end up winning the support of Donald Trump. He won that endorsement, and that really did help him in the very end. So, this race is already set to go. J.D. Vance for the Republican Party, Tim Ryan for the Democratic Party. Of course, J.D. Vance is an author as well as a political commentator, and Tim Ryan currently serves in the House, and I think that he will most likely not be in Congress after these midterms. I think that it will be very difficult for Tim Ryan to win. If you look at J.D. Vance's numbers, he did only end up leading in this primary at the very end after receiving the endorsement of Donald Trump. Before this, of course, Josh Mandel was the clear favorite for, months and months, going back to 2021. At the very beginning, he was in the lead, and J.D. Vance has been in this race for a very long time as well. So I think that in the race in the very end, it will be one that Tim Ryan will most likely lose. This is still the state of Ohio. I think that Tim Ryan is the best possible nominee Democrats could have put up in a state like Ohio, of course, except for Sherrod Brown, who is another senator already in the Senate. But besides him, I think that Tim Ryan is probably the best candidate Democrats could have nominated this year, but I think that it will still not be enough. This is a state that Donald Trump won by 8 points, both in 2016 and in 2022, and I think that with the Republicans having a good year, expected to have a good year in November this year, I think that it will be very unlikely for Tim Ryan to flip the state of Ohio. And of course, there has been 2 primaries because Rob Portman, the incumbent Republican, did choose to retire and not run for re-election, despite winning almost 60% of the vote last time. So in the state of Ohio, I will categorize it as being lean for the Republicans. I definitely do think that J.D. Vance does have an advantage in this race, mainly due to the partisan composition of the state currently, but I do not believe that he is especially a very good candidate. Just the fact that the numbers do just favor his party overall in the state of Ohio, especially in a red wave year where Joe Biden is the most unpopular president ever at this point in time. And so moving a little bit towards the east a little bit more here, we have the state of Pennsylvania, and in the state of Pennsylvania, we just had primary results come out a couple of days ago. The Democratic side was very easy, John Fetterman winning 60% of the vote. For the Republicans, the race is still contested. Mehmet Oz 31.2%, David McCormick 31.1%. There will be an automatic recount after the final mail-in ballots are counted, and so I think that in the end, Mehmet Oz will still most likely end up on top. There is a 1,000 vote difference, but these recounts normally only make a difference of around a few tens of votes. It's never over a few hundred, or 1,000 is just absolutely unheard of. There would have to be a really big mistake to have been made originally for there to be such a massive shift. So Mehmet Oz already is pretty much the presumptive winner. He has, I believe, an over 90% chance of ending up winning this race right now, according to the betting odds. So Mehmet Oz is most likely going to challenge John Fetterman. And looking at the polls that we've seen between the two candidates, you will see that in the one poll released, John Fetterman is leading. If you look at all the polls that have been released between Fetterman and the other candidates on the Republican side, of course, all these polls have been sponsored by John Fetterman or a Democratic PAC, so that's why they do show such favorable numbers for the lieutenant governor of Pennsylvania. But John Fetterman has been the frontrunner in this race for a very long time. That's why he's been in every single poll, while on the Republican side, of course, a primary was in question for a very, very long time. If you look at the Republican primary numbers, you will see that who was going to win was really in serious doubt for a very long time. It was only at the very end that Mehmet Oz really took back the lead after losing it to David McCormick for a few months since he started his campaign late last year. So Mehmet Oz, I don't think is the best candidate. I think David McCormick would actually perform better against John Fetterman. But with that said, Mehmet Oz is still probably going to be the Republican nominee in this race. And so against John Fetterman, who I think is a very good candidate, I do believe that right now the Democratic Party does have a very slight edge in the state of Pennsylvania. So I'm going to categorize that as being tilt for the Democrats. And moving up to the northeast here in the state of New Hampshire, we have another pretty exciting race here as well, where Maggie Hassan will be facing off against probably Donald Boldeau. She was elected in 2016 after defeating incumbent Republican Kelly Ayotte. So on the Republican side, in terms of polling, Don Boldeau, this is the only poll that's been released, has 33% of support. Every other candidate has basically no support, which was pretty surprising, even though Chuck Morse did have a pretty good chance of winning this race. He's only polling at 2%, but Donald Boldeau currently with 33% of the vote. Of course, these primary polls are very inaccurate, and if you have 33%, 58 is undecided, and these numbers, you're probably going to get at least 60 to 70% of the vote. So this race definitely does favor Maggie Hassan. Maggie Hassan has led in every single poll against Donald small Bordeaux, and I don't think that she is going to lose this November. Many people are saying this race is a lot closer than it really is. I really don't think that Maggie Hassan is going to have too much trouble winning. The state of New Hampshire is still one that heavily favors the Democratic Party. Even Hillary Clinton, who was very much hated in this state, was able to win it, although by a very small margin. She still ended up on top. I don't think that Maggie Hassan could possibly do worse than Hillary Clinton, and that was after 8 years of Barack Obama, who, if you don't remember, was also relatively unpopular. So Maggie is on here. I think that she is doing relatively well in her race and currently is poised to win her re-election. And so moving down south, we have 2 states left. The state of North Carolina, where we just saw a primary just a couple of days ago. Cheri Beasley easily won the Democratic primary. Ted Budd easily won the Republican primary against Pat McCrory, the former governor who lost to Roy Cooper in 2016. So Ted Budd here with 58% of the vote. I think that he is very likely to beat Cheri Beasley. Ted Budd is not relatively controversial at all. Also, if you look at just the turnout here, 600,000 to 760,000, Republicans definitely have an edge in the state, a state that Donald Trump was even able to hold on to in 2020. So there's really no hope here for the Democratic Party, if I'm going to be completely honest. Cheri Beasley, she is the former Chief Justice of the North Carolina Supreme Court, but even though she was able to defeat Jeff Jackson in this primary, I think that she really does not stand too much of a chance against Ted Budd. If you look at the polls that typically favor the Democratic Party, Ted Budd is already leading by 4.6%. We'll see what happens this November, but as of right now, I don't think things are looking too good for the Democrats in North Carolina. Of course, this is a race that they were not able to win in 2020 after the loss of Cal Cunningham to Tom Tillis. Cal Cunningham, of course, had a scandal very late in the campaign, and that really did ruin his chances. If he did not have that scandal, I do believe that Cal Cunningham would have defeated Tom Tillis, and the Democrats would have 51 seats in the Senate currently instead of 50, which winning again in 2022 a lot easier. And so finally, looking at the final state we have here, the state of Georgia, we have a primary here in just a couple of days on the 24th of May. So looking at the polls between Raphael Warnock and Herschel Walker, of course, this is a very high profile race. Warnock just won the 2021 special election runoff against Kelly Loeffler, and in my opinion, Herschel Walker, the current frontrunner for the GOP primary, endorsed by Donald Trump a very long time ago. Herschel Walker, I think, is a worse candidate than Kelly Loeffler, but with the national environment favoring the Republican Party in 2022, Herschel Walker has a very good chance at actually winning this race. So looking at the numbers between Warnock and Walker, if you were to look at the latest poll release, you will see that Raphael Warnock is leading over Herschel Walker by 5 points. But if you look at many of the other polls released earlier this year, they do show Walker ahead, +1, +1, +3, +4, and even +10 in this Republican PAC-funded poll. So if you were to scroll down to here, we can have a better list of how both candidates are doing. In this entire calendar year of 2022, Raphael Warnock has led in one poll. That is the latest one, but still, these are not favorable numbers for him at all. I think that Raphael Warnock will struggle in his race in November. And for context, Warnock was leading in the polls going into the 2021 runoff against Kelly Loeffler. So the polls in Georgia are relatively accurate. They did predict a Joe Biden victory by a very small margin, and they also did predict victories by both Raphael Warnock and Jon Ossoff. So the polls in the state of Georgia are pretty accurate, and I think that the fact that Raphael Warnock is behind currently is a big issue for his campaign. So looking at the latest polls we've seen so far, I'm going to give the Republicans currently 51 seats to 49 for the Democratic Party. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure you like down below if you enjoyed it. Comment down below how you feel about these categorizations and which races you are watching closely. Subscribe to our channel if you have not. Join my Discord server, link at the very top of the description below. Again, thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I will see you guys in the next one.